You have 30 seconds to explain why you deserve even $1 from the woman you called worthless.
You have 30 seconds to explain why you deserve even a single dollar from the woman you called worthless. Alana Morrison stood at the podium of the grand ballroom, her voice cutting through the stunned silence of 500 guests. Her emerald gown caught the light as she stared down at the man who had once promised to love her through sickness and health. Jake Henderson sat frozen at table 12, his face drained of color, finally understanding that the mysterious new benefactor who had just purchased his ex-boss's entire company was the same woman he had abandoned 3 years ago. The same woman he had publicly humiliated. The same woman he had called a burden. The same woman who now controlled his financial future with a stroke of a pen. You know what they say about karma. Sometimes it takes its time, but when it arrives, it never comes alone. It brings interest, compound interest, and a few friends to witness the show. Tonight, Alana Morrison was karma personified, and she had brought $1.2 billion in assets as her plus one. Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well wherever you're watching from. Whether you're dealing with some cold weather or enjoying sunshine, I've got a story that's going to warm your heart and remind you that sometimes the universe has a perfect sense of timing. My name is Alana Morrison, and this is a story of how I went from begging my husband not to abandon our sick children to becoming the woman who could buy and sell his entire world before lunch. But before we dive deep into tonight's confrontation, before we explore how a man can watch his wife work 3 jobs while their triplets fight for their lives and still choose to walk away, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button if you believe people should be held accountable for the hearts they break. Subscribe if you think loyalty should be rewarded and betrayal should have consequences. And share this story because everyone needs to know that walking away from your family when they need you most isn't just cruel. It's the worst investment decision you'll ever make. But let me start from the beginning, because every villain origin story starts with someone who used to be a hero. 3 years earlier, Alana Morrison believed in forever. At 26, she had built her life around 3 unshakable truths. Love conquered all. Family came first, and the man who held her hand in the hospital delivery room would never let go. She believed that when you married someone, you became a team, and teams supported each other through every season, every challenge, every unexpected turn. Alana had met Jake Henderson during her sophomore year at Howard University. He was studying business administration. She was pursuing civil engineering, and they both shared dreams bigger than their student loan debt. Jake used to say he fell in love with her mind first, the way she could calculate load-bearing requirements in her head, while explaining why the campus library needed better structural support. He loved her ambition, her intelligence, her refusal to accept limitations. They married 2 years after graduation in a small ceremony in her hometown of Richmond, Virginia. Alana's parents, both retired teachers, had saved for years to give their daughter the wedding she deserved. Jake's family attended reluctantly, making subtle comments about the cultural differences they would need to navigate. But Alana chose to focus on Jake's promises instead of his family's prejudices. We're going to build something beautiful together. Jake had whispered during their first dance, "Your dreams, my dreams, all of it, were unstoppable, baby." For 3 years, they were unstoppable. Alana worked at a mid-sized engineering firm, while slowly building her own construction consulting business on weekends. Jake climbed the corporate ladder at Morrison & Associates, a real estate development company where his charm and networking skills made him indispensable. They lived in a modest townhouse in Silver Spring, Maryland, saving every penny toward their shared goals. Alana's dream of starting her own firm, and Jake's ambition to become a partner somewhere prestigious. When Alana discovered she was pregnant with triplets, they were terrified and thrilled in equal measure. 3 babies meant 3 times the love, 3 times the expenses, and 3 times the reason to work harder than ever before. Jake painted the nursery himself, spending weekends assembling cribs and researching the best pediatricians in the area. 3 little engineers, he had joked, rubbing Alana's growing belly. They're going to take after their brilliant mother. The pregnancy was complicated from the beginning. Alana was confined to bed rest for the final 2 months, unable to work, watching their savings dwindle while their expenses multiplied. When Zoe, Marcus, and Amara were born 10 weeks premature, 2.5 years into their marriage. 2.5 years into their marriage. Each weighing barely 3 pounds, the real fight began. The neonatal intensive care unit became their second home. Alana practically lived at the hospital, learning to change diapers through incubator portholes, timing her life around feeding schedules and medical rounds. The babies needed surgery, specialized care, and constant monitoring. Insurance covered most of the medical expenses, but the hidden costs, parking fees, meals, gas money for the daily trips, the special formula and equipment they would need at home added up faster than their credit card limits. Jake started working overtime, picking up weekend shifts. By the time the triplets turned 2, something in Jake began to shift. Anything to keep them afloat financially. But somewhere between the 4th month in the NICU and the 6th sleepless night at home with 3 babies who cried in shifts, something in Jake began to shift too. He started missing pediatrician appointments, claiming urgent work meetings. He began staying late at the office, coming home after Alana had already bathed, fed, and put the triplets to sleep by herself. When she tried to talk to him about their struggles, he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly, always having somewhere else he needed to be. "I'm doing this for us," he would say whenever she asked him to be more present. "Someone has to keep us financially stable." But Alana noticed things. The way he flinched when Zoe cried. The way he avoided holding Marcus when his breathing treatments left him cranky and difficult. The way he seemed to calculate the cost of every medicine, every therapy session, every piece of adaptive equipment their children needed to thrive. What Alana didn't know was that Jake had already started having lunch meetings with his boss, Victoria Sterling. Beautiful, powerful, and recently divorced, Victoria had begun offering Jake more than just career advancement. She offered him an escape from the chaos of his life, a return to the ambitious, unencumbered man he used to be. Victoria Sterling owned everything Jake thought he wanted. A penthouse downtown, a summer house in the Hamptons, connections that could fast-track his career beyond his wildest dreams. Most importantly, she offered him a life without the constant worry, without the medical bills, without the reminder that sometimes love requires sacrifice instead of reward. "You're too good for this," Victoria had told him during one of their increasingly frequent dinners. "A man with your potential shouldn't be held back by circumstances beyond his control." Jake began to see his family differently. Where he once saw 3 beautiful children fighting to grow strong, he now saw obstacles to his ambitions. Where he once saw a brilliant wife building her own empire, he now saw someone whose energy was divided, whose focus was split, whose dreams had been derailed by the very children he had once been excited to meet. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in October. Marcus had been hospitalized again with pneumonia, his delicate lungs struggling with the infection. Alana had been at the hospital for 36 hours straight, surviving on vending machine coffee and pure determination. When she called Jake to bring her a change of clothes and some real food, he told her he couldn't leave work. "It's just pneumonia. Alana, the doctors have it under control. Just pneumonia," she had repeated, her voice breaking. "Jake, he's our son. He needs us. He needs medical professionals. I need to close this deal with Sterling Properties. Some of us have to think about our future." That night, when Marcus was finally stable and Alana came home exhausted and emotionally drained, she found divorce papers on the kitchen table, and Jake was nowhere to be found. What happened next would change everything, not just for Alana and her children, but for every person who ever thought they could discard someone's worth and never face the consequences. But first, Jake had to learn that some decisions can't be undone. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, and some women are far more powerful than the men who underestimate them could ever imagine. Alana stared at the divorce papers until the words blurred together. Irreconcilable differences, division of assets, custody arrangements, legal language that reduced 7 years of marriage to a business transaction, as if love could be itemized and filed away in alphabetical order. Her phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. Marcus was asking for Daddy. The nurses wanted to know if Jake would be coming for the evening visit. Alana looked around their empty living room at the family photos still hanging on the walls, at Jake's coffee mug still sitting in the sink from that morning, and realized she didn't even know where her husband was sleeping anymore. But let's back up 6 months, because betrayal doesn't happen overnight. It grows slowly, fed by opportunity and justified by selfishness, until the person you trusted most becomes someone you don't recognize at all. Jake Henderson had been Alana's biggest supporter when she first talked about starting her own construction firm. This was back when the triplets were 6 months old, finally home from the hospital, but still requiring round-clock care. Most husbands might have suggested their wives focus on the children, but Jake understood Alana's ambition because he had fallen in love with her drive. "You're the smartest engineer I know," he had told her one night as she worked on her business plan at the kitchen table, Zoe sleeping against her chest in a carrier. Morrison Construction is going to change everything. Alana had saved $15,000 from her engineering job before the babies were born. It wasn't enough to rent office space or hire employees, but it was enough to get licensed by basic equipment and start bidding on small residential projects. She worked from home, taking calls during the babies' nap times, scheduling site visits around pediatrician appointments, building her reputation one satisfied customer at a time. The work was exhausting, but exhilarating. Alana would spend her days caring for 3 infants who needed specialized attention, then stay up until 2 a.m. creating project proposals and reviewing construction plans. Jake would find her asleep at the computer, her head resting on blueprints, and gently carry her to bed. "I'm so proud of you," he would whisper. "You're building our future." For the first year, Jake meant it. He bragged about Alana to his coworkers, telling anyone who would listen how his wife would start her own company while raising triplets. He took vacation days to watch the children when Alana had important meetings. He even helped her practice presentations, playing the role of difficult clients so she could perfect her pitches. But Jake's support began to waver as his own career stagnated. While Alana's client base grew steadily, Jake remained stuck in middle management at Morrison and Associates. He watched younger colleagues get promoted around him, saw his salary increase by modest percentages, while his responsibilities multiplied exponentially. The contrast became more painful when Jake's work friends started asking why he wasn't advancing faster, especially since he was clearly intelligent and hardworking. The answer, though Jake would never admit it out loud, was that his family situation made him seem less committed to the firm. He left exactly at 5 p.m. to help with the children. He couldn't attend after-hours networking events because Alana needed him at home. He turned down travel opportunities because the triplets required too much specialized care for Alana to handle alone. Meanwhile, his boss, Victoria Sterling, seemed to glide through life effortlessly. Recently divorced from her tech executive husband, Victoria had emerged from her marriage with a substantial settlement and complete control of Sterling Properties, her family's real estate development firm. She was 34. Strikingly beautiful and unencumbered by the kind of domestic responsibilities that tied Jake down. Victoria began paying attention to Jake sometime around the triplets' first birthday. It started with small gestures, asking his opinion on deals, complimenting his market analysis, inviting him to represent the firm at industry conferences that Alana couldn't attend due to the children's schedules. "You have excellent instincts," Victoria told Jake after he successfully negotiated a particularly difficult acquisition. "I think you're ready for more responsibility." The more responsibility came with longer hours, client dinners, and weekend strategy sessions that Victoria insisted required Jake's input. Jake told himself he was building their financial security, but the truth was simpler and more selfish. Victoria's world felt like a vacation from his real life. At Victoria's office, Jake was successful, respected, and uninterrupted. No one cried during his presentations. No one needed breathing treatments during important phone calls. No one questioned his competence or commitment. Victoria saw him as the ambitious professional he used to be, not the perpetually exhausted father he had become. "Your wife is very lucky," Victoria mentioned one evening as they finished reviewing contracts over dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. "Not many men would sacrifice their career advancement for their family the way you have." The comment landed exactly as Victoria intended. Jake began to see his sacrifices not as love, but as limitations. He started resenting the pediatrician appointments that made him miss client meetings. He grew frustrated with Alana's exhaustion, which meant she couldn't attend the corporate social events that might help his career. Most dangerously, He began to wonder what his life might look like if he had made different choices. While Jake wrestled with his growing dissatisfaction, Alana was quietly building something extraordinary. Morrison Construction had expanded from small residential repairs to larger commercial renovations. Her reputation for delivering projects on time and under budget had spread through word of mouth, earning her contracts with local businesses and community organizations. What Jake didn't know was that Alana had been selected for a highly competitive bidding process for a massive federal infrastructure project. The Department of Transportation was seeking minority-owned firms to lead a $750 million highway expansion project, and Morrison Construction had somehow made it past the preliminary rounds despite being one of the smallest companies in consideration. Alana had been working on the proposal for months, staying up even later than usual, consulting with engineers across the country, developing innovative solutions that could save the government millions while creating hundreds of jobs. She hadn't told Jake about the opportunity because she didn't want to get his hopes up or her own. The chances of a 3-year-old firm winning such a massive contract were essentially zero. But sometimes the impossible happens when preparation meets opportunity, and Alana Morrison had been preparing her entire life for a moment like this. The irony was devastating. While Jake grew increasingly resentful of the family responsibilities that he believed were holding him back, Alana was proving that a black woman could build an empire while raising 3 medically fragile children. While Jake complained that marriage and fatherhood had derailed his ambitions, Alana was demonstrating that love and determination could overcome any obstacle. The final blow came on a Thursday evening in September. Jake arrived home 2 hours late, claiming another client dinner had run long. Alana was feeding the triplets their dinner, helping Marcus with his nebulizer treatment, while Zoe threw Cheerios on the floor, and Amara practiced walking between the kitchen chairs. "How was your day?" Alana asked the same question she asked every evening, still hoping to connect with the man she had married. "Fine," Jake replied, already walking toward the stairs. "I need to shower." But Alana caught a whiff of perfume as he passed. Expensive and floral. Nothing like the practical, unscented products they use because of the children's sensitivities. She noticed a lipstick mark on his collar, faint but unmistakable. Most telling of all, she saw the way Jake avoided eye contact, the way he seemed eager to wash away evidence of wherever he had really been. That night, after the children were finally asleep, Alana made a decision that would change everything. She opened her laptop and began documenting every sign she had ignored, every excuse she had accepted, every moment when her husband had chosen someone else over his family. She didn't know yet that tomorrow morning would bring the phone call that would transform Morrison Construction from a small firm into a billion-dollar empire. She didn't know that Jake was already planning to leave her for Victoria Sterling. She didn't know that her children would become her greatest source of strength instead of the burden Jake increasingly saw them as. All Alana knew was that she deserved better. Her children deserved better. And whatever happened next, she would face it with the same determination that had carried her through medical school rejections, difficult pregnancies, and sleepless nights in the NICU. Some women break when they discover betrayal. Others use it as fuel to build something beautiful. Alana Morrison was about to prove she belonged to the second category. The phone call that would change everything came at 6:47 a.m. on a Friday morning, while Alana was preparing bottles for the triplets. Marcus had been up most of the night with a respiratory infection, and Alana was running on 3 hours of sleep and determination when her phone buzzed with Washington, D.C. area code. "Miss Morrison, this is Director Patricia Williams from the Department of Transportation. Are you sitting down?" Alana sank into the kitchen chair, still holding Marcus against her shoulder as he weaved softly. "Yes, ma'am. Morrison Construction has been awarded the I-95 Corridor Expansion Project. The contract is worth $750 million over the next 4 years. Congratulations, Miss Morrison. You just became the youngest black female contractor to win a federal infrastructure project of this magnitude." The bottle slipped from Alana's free hand, formula spilling across the kitchen floor as the words sank in. $750 million. Her tiny company, built from $15,000 in savings and fueled by midnight coffee and pure stubborn, had just won the contract that would establish her as one of the most successful contractors in the country. "Ms. Morrison, are you there?" Yes, I'm here. When do we start? The preliminary meetings begin Monday. Full environmental approval and groundbreaking are scheduled for January. Ms. Morrison, I have to tell you, your proposal was extraordinary. The innovation you've shown, the cost savings, the job creation projections. This is exactly the kind of vision we need for America's infrastructure future. Alana hung up the phone and stared at Marcus, who had finally fallen asleep against her chest. $750 million. Enough to secure her children's medical care for life. Enough to expand Morrison Construction into a national firm. Enough to prove that every sleepless night, every rejected proposal, every moment when she chose to keep building instead of giving up had been worth it. She couldn't wait to tell Jake. But Jake was already gone. His side of the bed hadn't been slept in. His coffee cup wasn't in the sink. And his work clothes were missing from the closet when Alana called his office. The receptionist told her Jake had requested a personal day. By 2:00 p.m., Alana knew exactly where he was. Victoria Sterling's Mercedes was parked in the lot of the Marriott downtown, the same hotel where Sterling Properties held all their corporate events. Jake's Honda was 3 spaces away. The confrontation Alana had been avoiding for months finally happened that evening when Jake came home just as she was putting the triplets to bed. She had spent the day alternating between euphoria over the contract and devastation over his betrayal, trying to process the biggest professional victory of her life, while her marriage collapsed around her. "We need to talk," Alana said as Jake walked to the front door, not bothering with their usual greeting routine. "Actually, we do." Jake's voice was cold, distant, like he was addressing a business associate instead of his wife. "I've made some decisions about our future." "Our future?" Alana laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Funny, because I just got the most incredible news about our future, and you weren't here to share it with me." Jake set down a manila envelope on the kitchen counter. "Alana, this isn't working. We both know it. The kids need constant medical attention. You're always exhausted, and we barely have time for each other anymore. I think we'd both be happier if we admitted this marriage was a mistake." The words hit like physical blows. A mistake. Our children are fighting for their health every day. And you think our marriage is a mistake. I think we wanted different things, and now we have clarity about what those things are. Jake's tone was rehearsed like he had practiced this speech. "I've been offered a partnership at Sterling Properties. Victoria believes in my potential, and frankly, she can offer me opportunities you can't." Victoria Alana's voice rose dangerously. "You're leaving your family for your boss. I'm choosing a future that makes sense." Victoria doesn't come with complications. She doesn't come with medical bills and sleepless nights and constant crisis management. She comes with connections, with financial stability, with a lifestyle that actually supports my career instead of sabotaging it. Alana stared at the stranger, wearing her husband's face. "Jake, I got the call this morning. Morrison Construction just won a $750 million federal contract. We're going to be financially secure beyond anything we ever dreamed." For just a moment, Jake's composure cracked. "What?" "The I-95 expansion project for years. $750 million. I was going to surprise you, but apparently you've been busy making other plans." Jake's eyes flickered with something that might have been regret, but it was quickly replaced by stubborn justification. "That's great, Alana. Really. But money doesn't fix everything. Money doesn't make Marcus healthy. Money doesn't give us back the life we used to have. Money gives our children the best medical care available. Money means we never have to choose between Marcus breathing treatments and paying rent. Money means Zoe can get the physical therapy she needs for her developmental delays. Money means Amara's heart surgery can happen at the best children's hospital in the country instead of wherever our insurance decides to send us. And what about us?" Jake's voice cracked slightly. "What about the life we planned before all this happened? What about traveling together, building careers together, having time for each other? When was the last time we had dinner without someone crying? When was the last time we had a conversation that didn't revolve around medical appointments?" Alana felt something break inside her chest, but it wasn't her heart. It was the last of her illusions about the man she had married. "You're asking me to choose between my children and my husband. I'm asking you to be realistic about what our life has become. Our life became about love. It became about showing up for people who need us. It became about proving that family means something more than convenience. Alana's voice dropped to a whisper. But apparently, you never got that memo. Jake opened the manila envelope and pulled out a thick stack of papers. I've already filed for divorce. I'm asking for joint custody of the children, but I think we both know they're better off with you as the primary caregiver. I've also taken the liberty of closing our joint savings account and moving my portion to a separate account. You'll find the documentation in here. The room spun. You emptied our savings account, Jake. That money was for the children's medical expenses. Half of that money was mine. I'm entitled to it. Entitled? Alana's voice rose again. You're entitled to abandon your sick children and take the money we save for their care. I'm entitled to start my new life without being financially responsible for choices I didn't make. Choices you didn't make. Alana was shouting, now past caring, as she woke the triplets. You didn't choose to have children. You didn't choose to marry me. You didn't choose to promise to love me through sickness and health. I didn't choose to have 3 medically fragile children who will need constant care for the rest of their lives. I didn't choose to watch my career stagnate while my wife builds a business I can never be part of. I didn't choose to become a caregiver instead of a husband. The words hung in the air like poison. Alana realized at this moment, this conversation would define the rest of their lives. Jake was asking her to understand his betrayal, to sympathize with his selfishness, to forgive him for abandoning their children when they needed him most. Instead, she made a choice that would haunt Jake for years to come. Get out, Alana. We can do this civilly. Get out of my house. Get away from my children. And Jake. Alana's voice was deadly calm. Now, the voice of a woman who had just discovered her own power. When you realize what you've thrown away, when Victoria gets tired of you and you understand that you traded a family who loved you for a woman who sees you as a convenient accessory, don't come back. Don't call. Don't ask for forgiveness. Jake gathered his papers and headed for the door, pausing only to say, you'll understand eventually. This is better for everyone. But as the door closed behind him, Alana knew with absolute certainty that Jake Henderson had just made the most expensive mistake of his life. He had walked away from a woman who had just secured $750 million in government contracts. He had abandoned children who would grow up to be extraordinary. He had chosen temporary comfort over permanent love. Most importantly, he had underestimated the kind of woman Alana Morrison really was. The woman who would spend the next 3 years building an empire with his children's names on it. The woman who would prove that some kinds of strength only emerge when everything else falls apart. The woman who would eventually stand in a ballroom full of Washington's most powerful people and make Jake Henderson wish he had never been born. But first, she had to survive tomorrow and the day after that, and every day for the next 3 years while she transformed betrayal into the fuel for something beautiful. The first month after Jake left, Alana discovered that being a single mother to 3 medically fragile toddlers while launching a multi-million-dollar construction project was like performing surgery during an earthquake. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and everything that went right came with a price tag she wasn't sure she could afford. Marcus developed pneumonia, again the same week Alana was supposed to sign the final contracts with the Department of Transportation. She spent 48 hours in the pediatric ICU negotiating construction timelines over phone while holding her son's hand through the ventilator tubes. The federal project managers were understanding but firm. Delays would result in penalty clauses that could bankrupt Morrison Construction before it even began. Miss Morrison, we need your signature on these documents by Friday, Director Williams explained during a video call from Marcus Hospital Room. The Congressional Appropriations Committee is breathing down our necks, and any delays could jeopardize the entire project. Alana balanced her laptop on her knees while Zoe napped in a chair beside Marcus' bed, and Amara played quietly with blocks on the floor. I understand completely. My legal team is reviewing everything tonight, and I'll have the signed contracts to you by Thursday afternoon. What Alana didn't mention was that her legal team consisted of one overworked attorney who was billing her $200 an hour she could barely afford, and that she was reviewing most of the contract herself at 2 a.m. while the children slept. Meanwhile, Jake was settling into his new life with remarkable ease. Victoria Sterling had wasted no time making their relationship public, introducing Jake as her partner at industry events and featuring him prominently in Sterling Properties marketing materials. Within weeks, Jake had gone from middle management to Victoria's right hand, overseeing acquisitions and representing the firm at high negotiations. The transformation was dramatic and intentional. Victoria had Jake fitted for expensive suits, taught him the social graces that came with wealth, and introduced him to the kind of influential people who could fast-track a career overnight. To anyone watching from the outside, Jake Henderson appeared to be a man who had traded up magnificently. He certainly landed on his feet. Alana's neighbor, Mrs. Chin, observed one afternoon as they watched Jake's new BMW pull into the driveway to collect his children for their court-mandated weekend visitation. "That's quite an upgrade from the Honda." Alana said nothing, but she noticed things Mrs. Chin didn't. The way Jake stayed in the car instead of coming to the door. The way he had the children dropped off by Victoria's nanny instead of bringing them home himself. The way he scheduled his visits around his social obligations, treating time with Zoe, Marcus, and Amara like an inconvenient appointment rather than the highlight of his week. The legal battles began almost immediately. Jake's attorney, paid for by Victoria Sterling, filed motion after motion designed to drain Alana's resources and force her to accept an unfavorable custody arrangement. They questioned her ability to provide stable housing while managing a demanding career. They requested detailed financial records of Morrison Construction, claiming Jake deserved spousal support despite having abandoned his family for a wealthier woman. Most cruelly, they suggested that the children might be better served in Jake's care, arguing that Victoria's resources could provide superior medical treatment and educational opportunities. Your Honor, Jake's attorney argued during one particularly brutal hearing. Mr. Henderson is now in a position to provide these children with advantages Miss Morrison simply cannot match. Sterling Properties maintains relationships with the finest pediatric specialists in the country, and Miss Morrison's demanding travel schedule raises serious questions about her availability as a primary caregiver. Alana's attorney, David Reyes, fought back with facts and passion, but the disparity in resources was obvious. David was a good lawyer working alone. Jake's legal team consisted of 4 attorneys from one of D.C.'s most prestigious firms, backed by Victoria Sterling's seemingly unlimited budget. Your Honor, David countered, Miss Morrison has never missed a medical appointment, never failed to provide for her children's needs, and has built a successful business while maintaining her primary responsibility as their mother. Mr. Henderson, meanwhile, has seen his children exactly 12 times in the past 4 months, missed Marcus' surgery consultation last week, and has yet to attend a single physical therapy session for Zoe. The judge ultimately maintained the existing custody arrangement, but the legal fees were crushing Alana financially. Every hour spent in court was an hour not spent building Morrison Construction. Every dollar spent on attorneys was a dollar not available for the children's medical expenses. The pressure was relentless and multifaceted. Alana would spend her days managing construction crews and reviewing engineering reports, then rush to pick up the triplets from daycare, where the staff never failed to mention how difficult the children had been that day. Marcus' respiratory issues made him cranky and clingy. Zoe was behind on her developmental milestones and required intensive physical therapy 3 times a week. Amara, the healthiest of 3, had begun acting out in response to her parents' divorce, throwing tantrums that left everyone exhausted. Evenings meant homework with the daycare providers, medication schedules, breathing treatments, and bedtime routines that stretched past 9 p.m. on good nights. After the children were finally asleep, Alana would return to her laptop, reviewing contracts and managing the early phases of the I-95 project until her eyes burned from exhaustion. The irony was devastating. Morrison Construction was thriving beyond Alana's wildest dreams, but she was too overwhelmed to enjoy the success. The federal contract had led to 3 additional government projects and 2 major private developments. Alana was making more money than she had ever imagined possible, but she was also working 18-hour days while raising 3 toddlers alone. Jake, meanwhile, seemed to be enjoying the best of both worlds. He had the children every other weekend, which meant he got to be the fun parent who took them to expensive restaurants and bought them elaborate toys. While Alana handled the mundane realities of medical appointments, grocery shopping, and discipline, He was building a reputation as a dedicated father who had courageously taken on the challenges of raising special needs children, conveniently omitting the fact that he saw them 8 days per month. The worst part was how Jake had rewritten their entire history. In interviews with trade publications about his rapid rise at Sterling Properties, Jake portrayed himself as a devoted father who had made difficult sacrifices to provide better opportunities for his children. He spoke eloquently about the challenges of co-parenting children with medical needs and the importance of building financial security for their future. "My ex-wife is doing amazing work with her construction firm," Jake told DC Business Journal. "We're both committed to making sure our children have every advantage possible, which is why I've chosen to focus on building the kind of wealth that can secure their medical care for life." Alana read the article while waiting for Marcus' blood work results and felt something inside her chest turn to ice. Jake was taking credit for her success, positioning himself as a responsible parent, and making it sound like their divorce had been a mutual decision based on what was best for the children. The lies were so elaborate and well-crafted that even Alana began to question her own memories sometimes. Had their marriage really been as strong as she remembered? Had Jake really been as supportive as she thought? When people at industry events asked about her ex-husband's success, Alana found herself making excuses for him instead of telling the truth about his abandonment. Victoria Sterling was the master architect of Jake's rehabilitation. She had transformed him from a man who had abandoned his sick children into a tragic figure who had been forced to make difficult choices for his family's benefit. At charity galas and business conferences, Victoria would speak movingly about Jake's dedication to his children and his courage in building a more stable future for them. Jake could have chosen the easy path, Victoria told the audience at a United Way fundraiser, but he chose to build something bigger, something that could truly serve his children's long-term needs. That's the kind of integrity and vision that Sterling Properties values. The performance was flawless, and the Washington business community bought it completely. Jake Henderson was no longer a deadbeat dad. He was a devoted father making strategic decisions. Alana Morrison was no longer the abandoned wife, building an empire from scratch. She was the ex-wife who had been too stubborn to recognize her children's best interests. But Alana knew the truth, and she was keeping records. Every missed visitation, every medical appointment Jake skipped, every time he sent Victoria's assistant to pick up the children instead of coming himself, every court filing designed to drain her resources rather than serve their children's interests. Most importantly, Alana was building something Jake couldn't touch, couldn't claim, and couldn't take away. Morrison Construction was becoming a force in the industry, and Alana was earning a reputation for integrity and excellence that no amount of Victoria Sterling's public relations could undermine. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March, 6 months after Jake had left. Alana was at the construction site for the I-95 project, reviewing safety protocols with her foreman, when her phone rang with a call from the children's daycare. "Ms. Morrison, you need to come immediately. Marcus is having trouble breathing, and his father isn't answering his emergency contact number." It was Jake's day to pick up the children. According to their custody agreement, he was supposed to collect them at 4:00 p.m. and take them to his apartment for the week. Instead, Marcus was in respiratory distress at the daycare center. Zoe was crying because her physical therapy appointment had been missed, and Amar was asking why Daddy never came when he promised he would. Alana arrived at the daycare to find Marcus using his emergency inhaler, his little face pale and frightened. The daycare director pulled her aside with barely contained frustration. "Ms. Morrison, this is the third time this month that Mr. Henderson hasn't shown up for his scheduled pickup. We've called his office, we've called his cell phone, and we've called the emergency number he provided. No one knows where he is." Alana loaded her 3 children into her car, canceling an important client meeting and rearranging her entire week to accommodate Jake's failure to be a parent. As she drove Marcus to the pediatrician for his breathing issues, she realized that Jake's new life had become more important to him than his responsibilities to their children. That evening, Jake finally called with a casual apology and an elaborate excuse involving a last-minute business trip to New York. He spoke as if missing his pickup day was a minor inconvenience rather than a breach of his parental obligations. "I'll make it up to them next weekend," Jake promised. "Victoria has tickets to the circus. The kids will love it. But Alana was done accepting Jake's excuses, done making allowances for his selfishness, and done pretending that his betrayal hadn't fundamentally changed who he was as a person. She was also done being the understanding ex-wife, who prioritized Jake's reputation over her children's well-being. The next morning, Alana made a decision that would change everything. She called David Reyes and told him to file for full custody. She also made another call to a private investigator recommended by one of her construction clients. Because if Jake Henderson wanted to play games with their children's lives, Alana Morrison was going to make sure she had all the facts she needed to win. The private investigator's report arrived on a Thursday morning in April, delivered in a plain manila envelope that would destroy the last of Alana's faith in human decency. She had hired Rebecca Martinez to document Jake's fitness as a parent, expecting to find evidence of missed visits and neglected responsibilities. Instead, she discovered that Jake Henderson wasn't just a bad father, he was a criminal. "Miss Morrison, you need to sit down for this," Rebecca had said during their meeting the previous evening. "What I found goes way beyond custody issues." Alana sat in her kitchen at 5 o'clock a.m., the triplets still sleeping upstairs, and opened the folder that contained photographs, financial records, and legal documents that painted a picture of systematic fraud. Jake hadn't just abandoned his family for Victoria Sterling. He had stolen from them. The first photograph showed Jake's signature on mortgage documents for a luxury condo in Georgetown. The purchase price was $1.2 million, financed through Sterling Properties with a down payment of $240,000. The date on the documents was 3 weeks before Jake had filed for divorce. The second photograph showed the source of that down payment. Withdrawal slips from the joint savings account Jake had claimed to split equally with Alana. Instead of taking half of their $30,000 in savings, Jake had systematically drained the account over 6 months, transferring money into a personal investment account that he used to fund his new lifestyle with Victoria. But the worst discovery was buried on page 12 of the report. Jake had also taken out a second mortgage on their family home, using Alana's electronic signature from old mortgage documents to authorize a $150,000 home equity loan. The money had been deposited into Jake's personal account and immediately transferred to Sterling Properties as an investment in future partnership opportunities. Alana stared at the documents until her vision blurred. Jake hadn't just left her with 3 sick children and no savings. He had stolen their home equity and forged her signature to do it. The house she was struggling to maintain, the safe haven she was trying to provide for her children, was now mortgaged to the point where they could lose everything if she missed even one payment. The financial devastation was comprehensive and calculated. Jake had systematically stripped their marriage of every asset he could access, then presented himself to the courts as a responsible party, who deserved support and consideration. While Alana worked 18-hour days to keep Morrison Construction afloat and care for their children, Jake had been planning his escape and funding it with money meant for Marcus' medical expenses. But the Krillis revelation was yet to come. Rebecca's investigation had uncovered the real timeline of Jake's relationship with Victoria Sterling. They hadn't begun their affair after the children were born, as Alana had assumed. They had been involved romantically for over 2 years, beginning when Alana was pregnant with the triplets and confined to bed rest. The hotel records go back 26 months. Rebecca explained in her written report. Sterling Properties maintains a corporate suite at the Marriott, and Mr. Dr. Henderson has been using it regularly since your 7th month of pregnancy. Staff members remember him specifically because he always requested the same suite and often stayed through the weekend. 26 months Jake had been cheating on Alana while she was carrying their children, lying in bed worried about premature labor, counting kicks and praying that Zoe, Marcus, and Amar would survive to see their first birthday. He had been planning his exit strategy while Alana planned their nursery. The photographs from hotel security cameras were time-stamped and devastating. Jake entering the Marriott on a Saturday afternoon while Alana was on bed rest. Jake and Victoria leaving together for romantic dinners while Alana ate takeout alone, too exhausted and swollen to cook. Jake laughing and holding Victoria's hand in the hotel lobby on the same day Marcus had been rushed to the emergency room with breathing complications. Every memory from the past 3 years was suddenly recontextualized. Jake's increasing distance during her pregnancy hadn't been stress about becoming a father. It had been guilt about his affair. His reluctance to spend time at the hospital when the babies were born hadn't been discomfort with medical settings. It had been impatient to return to Victoria. His claims that the children's medical needs were straining their marriage hadn't been honest concerns. They had been convenient excuses to justify abandoning his family for a woman he had been seeing all along. But perhaps the most devastating discovery was Jake's real motivation for the divorce. According to financial records Rebecca had obtained through a contact at Sterling Properties, Victoria was planning to take her company public within the next 2 years. As her husband, Jake would be entitled to significant equity in the firm. The divorce wasn't about escaping the challenges of raising special needs children. It was about positioning himself to become a wealthy man through marriage to Victoria Sterling. Jake had calculated the financial benefits of abandoning his family and decided the trade was worth it. 3 children's well-being, a wife's love, and 7 years of marriage were acceptable losses if it meant access to Victoria's fortune and social status. The final piece of evidence was a recorded conversation between Jake and Victoria captured by the private investigator through a contact at Sterling Properties. The quality was poor, but the content was crystal clear. When this all settles down, you'll have everything you want. Victoria's voice was confident and dismissive. The custody arrangement limits your obligations to the children. Alana will be too busy with her little construction company to cause problems, and we can focus on building our real future together. I just want to make sure she can't come after us later. Jake's voice was worried, almost whining. The kits are expensive, and if Morrison Construction fails, she might try to claim I owe her support. Darling, by the time our IPO goes through, you'll be worth $50 million. What your ex-wife does with her life will be completely irrelevant. Alana listened to the recording 3 times, each playback revealing new layers of betrayal. Jake wasn't just leaving his family. He was actively working to ensure they would struggle without him. Victoria wasn't just offering him an escape from responsibility. She was encouraging him to view his children as financial liabilities to be minimized. The realization that followed was even more devastating than the evidence itself. Alana understood with crystal clarity that she had never really known Jake Henderson at all. The man she had fallen in love with, married, and built a life with was either a complete fiction or had been so fundamentally changed by greed and selfishness that nothing remained of the person she had once trusted. 7 years of marriage, 3 children, and countless shared dreams had all been sacrificed for Victoria Sterling's money and the promise of a lifestyle Jake thought he deserved. Alana's love, her loyalty, and her children's need for their father were all secondary to Jake's ambition and Victoria's wealth. The morning after reviewing Rebecca's report, Alana made a series of phone calls that would change the trajectory of everything. First, she called her attorney to report the financial fraud and begin criminal proceedings against Jake. Second, she called her bank to report the forged signature on the home equity loan. Third, she called the Department of Transportation to report potential ethics violations in Jake's work with Sterling Properties, given that Victoria's firm was bidding on federal contracts that could create conflict of interest. But the most important call was to her children's pediatrician to schedule emergency sessions with a child psychologist who had been helping them adjust to the divorce. Because Alana realized that the children deserved to know the truth about their father. Not the details of his crimes, but the reality that his absence from their lives wasn't their fault, wasn't temporary, and wasn't going to change. Sometimes people make choices that show who they really are. Alana explained to 3-year-old Zoe that evening as they read bedtime stories. Daddy chose to go live with someone else. And that choice tells us that he's not ready to be the daddy you deserve. Marcus, still struggling with respiratory issues that required nightly breathing treatments, looked up from his nebulizer with a serious expression that made him seem older than his years. Is Daddy coming back? Alana looked at her son, brave, fragile, fighting every day to breathe easily, and realized that Jake had abandoned a child who would grow up to be extraordinary. No, baby, Daddy isn't coming back. But that doesn't mean you're not loved. Mommy loves you enough for 2 parents. And we're going to build something beautiful together. Amara, the strongest of the triplets, climbed into Alana's lap with the confidence that came from being thoroughly loved. Are we going to be okay, Mommy? And for the first time since receiving the divorce papers, Alana answered that question with complete honesty. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be better than okay. We're going to be unstoppable. That night, after the children were asleep, Alana sat at her kitchen table and made a list of everything Jake had taken from them. The money, the security, the belief that marriage meant partnership, the trust that love could survive any challenge. The list was long and painful, but it wasn't complete. Jake had also taken something else. Alana's willingness to be quiet about injustice, her tolerance for betrayal, and her acceptance of being underestimated. He had pushed her past the point where forgiveness was possible or advisable. He had created an enemy he didn't even know existed yet. Because while Jake was planning his future as Victoria Sterling's husband and business partner, Alana Morrison was planning something else entirely. She was planning to become the kind of woman who could destroy someone's life with the same casual efficiency Jake had used to destroy hers. Morrison Construction was about to become more than a successful business. It was about to become a weapon wielded by a woman who had finally learned that some people only understand consequences when those consequences arrive with compound interest. Jake Henderson thought he'd gotten away with a perfect crime, stealing a woman's savings, abandoning his children, and rewriting history to make himself the hero of his own story. He was about to discover that Alana Morrison was a much more dangerous opponent than the exhausted, overwhelmed mother he had left behind. The criminal investigation into Jake's financial fraud should have been Alana's salvation. Instead, it became the mechanism for her complete destruction. Victoria Sterling had spent 15 years building relationships with prosecutors, judges, and politicians throughout the D.C. area. When Alana's attorney filed criminal charges against Jake for forging her signature and stealing their savings, Victoria activated every connection she had to protect her investment. The first sign of trouble came when Detective Sarah Martinez, the financial crimes investigator assigned to Alana's case, called with news that made no sense. "Miss Morrison, I'm afraid we've hit some complications with your fraud claim. Mr. Henderson's attorney has provided documentation suggesting that you actually authorized a home equity loan and the account transfers. According to their records, you signed off on these transactions electronically using your business account access." Alana sat in her car outside Marcus' physical therapy appointment, feeling the ground shift beneath her. "Detective Martinez, I never authorized any of those transactions. I've never even seen those documents before Rebecca's investigation. I understand your confusion, but the electronic signatures match your digital certificate from Morrison Construction's business banking. Mr. Henderson's attorney is claiming that you agreed to these transfers to help fund Sterling Properties projects that would benefit your own construction contracts." The accusation was brilliant in its simplicity. Victoria's legal team had found a way to turn Alana's business success against her, suggesting that the money transfers were part of a complex business arrangement rather than theft. They were painting Alana as a bitter ex-wife trying to criminalize legitimate business transactions because she regretted her financial decisions after the divorce. Furthermore, Detective Martinez continued, "Sterling Properties has filed a counter-complaint alleging that you're using false criminal charges to harass Mr. Henderson and damage their business reputation. They're requesting that we investigate you for filing false police reports." The investigation that was supposed to prove Jake's criminality instead became a spotlight on Alana's own actions. Every business decision she had made, every client relationship she had built, every contract Morrison Construction had won was suddenly subject to scrutiny by investigators looking for evidence of her supposed vindictiveness. The Department of Transportation, nervous about negative publicity surrounding their largest minority contractor, began asking uncomfortable questions about Morrison Construction's financing and business practices. The ethics investigation Alana had requested into Victoria's federal contract bids was turned around into an investigation of whether Alana had used inside information from her ex-husband to gain competitive advantages. "Miss Morrison, we need to discuss some concerns that have been raised about potential conflicts of interest," Director Patricia Williams said during a conference call that felt more like an interrogation. "We received allegations that Morrison Construction may have accessed confidential Sterling Properties bid information through your personal relationship with Mr. Henderson." Alana found herself defending not just her integrity, but her right to exist in the same industry as her ex-husband. Every success Morrison Construction had achieved was reframed as potentially fraudulent. Every contract she had won was questioned as possibly the result of insider information rather than her superior engineering and project management. The legal pressure was relentless and expensive. Jake's fraud charges were dismissed after Victoria's attorneys provided doctored evidence of Alana's supposed authorization. Meanwhile, the false police report investigation dragged on for months, requiring Alana to hire additional legal representation she couldn't afford. While her business reputation was systematically destroyed by innuendo and accusations, the custody battle became a weapon of financial destruction. Victoria's legal team filed motion after motion, each one designed to drain Alana's resources and portray her as an unstable parent who is more focused on revenge than child rearing. They requested psychological evaluations, parenting assessments, and detailed financial audits that cost thousands of dollars and took time away from both her children and her business. Your Honor, Miss Morrison's recent erratic behavior raises serious concerns about her ability to provide stable care for these children. Jake's attorney argued during a custody hearing that felt like a public execution. She has filed false criminal charges against their father, made wild accusations about forged documents, and seems more interested in destroying Mr. Henderson's reputation than cooperating in their co-parenting relationship. The judge, influenced by the carefully crafted narrative Victoria's team had created, began to see Alana as exactly what they claimed she was, a bitter ex-wife using her children as weapons against their father. The custody arrangement was modified to give Jake more time with the triplets based on the argument that he was providing them with a more stable, less contentious environment. But the cruelest blow came when Alana discovered the true extent of Victoria's influence. The home equity loan Jake had fraudulently obtained was called in for immediate payment, and Alana learned that Sterling Properties had purchased a debt from the original lender. Victoria Sterling now held a mortgage on Alana's family home, and she was demanding full payment within 30 days. Miss Morrison, this is unfortunate, but business is business. Victoria's attorney explained during a phone call that felt like psychological torture. Sterling Properties acquired this debt as part of portfolio purchase, and company policy requires immediate collection on loans that are in technical default. Alana's house, the safe haven she had fought to maintain for her children, the symbol of everything she was trying to protect, was about to be foreclosed on by the woman who had stolen her husband. Victoria was literally taking the roof from over her children's heads, while positioning herself as a stable parental figure who could provide them with security. The business consequences were devastating. Clients began canceling contracts with Morrison Construction, nervous about being associated with a firm under federal investigation. The I-95 project, which should have established Alana as one of the premier contractors in the region, was suspended pending the outcome of the ethics investigation. 3 years of building relationships and reputation were wiped out in 6 months of systematic character assassination. Alana's personal savings, everything she had earned from the initial government contracts, went to legal fees and the desperate attempt to save her home. She took out loans against Morrison Construction's equipment, mortgaged her vehicles, and exhausted every line of credit she could access. The successful businesswoman who had been featured on magazine covers as an inspiring example of entrepreneurship was quietly filing for personal bankruptcy while trying to keep her company afloat. The isolation was almost worse than the financial pressure. Industry colleagues who had once courted Alana's business began avoiding her at professional events. Former friends stopped returning her calls, uncomfortable with being associated with someone under federal investigation. Even the children's daycare began treating her differently, asking pointed questions about whether her legal troubles might affect her ability to pay tuition. The health consequences were inevitable. Alana's immune system, weakened by stress and exhaustion, finally collapsed. She developed pneumonia. The same week Marcus was hospitalized for his own respiratory crisis, leaving her bedroom while trying to coordinate his medical care from her phone. When she missed 2 important court hearings due to her illness, Jake's attorneys used her absence as evidence that she was too unstable to be a primary caregiver. The morning Alana received the final foreclosure notice, she sat in her empty kitchen. Most of the furniture had been sold to pay legal bills and realized that Victoria Sterling had achieved something remarkable. She had taken a woman who controlled $750 million in government contracts and reduced her to someone who couldn't afford to keep her children's home. But the absolute lowest point came when Jake arrived at her door with a custody modification order and a moving truck. Alana, this doesn't have to be difficult. Jake said, standing on the porch of the house he had helped steal from her. "The judge thinks the children need stability right now, and frankly, I could provide that better than you can." Behind him, Victoria Sterling waited in her Mercedes, wearing sunglasses and an expression of polite sympathy that didn't quite hide her satisfaction. She had orchestrated Alana's complete destruction and was now here to collect the prize, temporary custody of the children she had helped Jake abandon. "You're not taking my children," Alana said, her voice from the pneumonia that still left her weak and dizzy. "I'm not taking them. The court is awarding them to me temporarily while you get your life together. Look around, Alana. You can't even keep a roof over their heads. How are you going to take care of 3 special needs children when you can't take care of yourself?" The custody order was temporary, but felt permanent. Zoe, Marcus, and Amara would live with Jake and Victoria for 6 months, while Alana attended court-mandated counseling and demonstrated her ability to provide stable housing and income. The children she had fought to protect from the moment they were conceived were being removed from her care because she had tried to hold their father accountable for his crimes. As Jake loaded the children's belongings into Victoria's luxury vehicle, Alana watched from her living room window and understood that she had lost everything that mattered. Her business was destroyed. Her home was foreclosed. Her children were gone, and her reputation was in ruins. Victoria Sterling had methodically stripped away every aspect of Alana's life, using the legal system and her own wealth as weapons. That night, alone in the empty house she would lose within the week, Alana sat on the floor where her kitchen table used to be and faced the complete wreckage of her life. 3 years earlier, she had been a successful engineer with a loving husband and 3 beautiful children. Now she was a single mother facing bankruptcy, federal investigation, and the loss of everything she had tried to build. Victoria Sterling had won completely. She had taken Jake, taken the children temporarily, taken the house, and taken Alana's reputation. She had proven that wealth and connections could overcome justice, that systematic destruction was possible when you had enough lawyers and enough influence. But as Alana sat in the darkness of her empty home, something began to crystallize in her mind. Victoria had made one crucial mistake in her campaign of destruction. She had assumed that breaking Alana would be permanent, that someone who had been reduced to nothing would stay nothing. Victoria Sterling had never encountered a woman who could transform complete devastation into pure determination. She had never met someone who could use the experience of losing everything as fuel to build something even greater. Most importantly, Victoria had never faced an opponent who understood that some battles are won not by fighting fair, but by fighting smart, patient, and absolutely ruthlessly. Alana Morrison was about to teach Victoria Sterling that there's a difference between being defeated and being destroyed. And sometimes a woman you think you destroyed is actually the most dangerous enemy you'll ever face. The foreclosure notice was scheduled for Friday, but by Thursday morning, Alana had made a phone call that would change everything. She had one card left to play, one asset Victoria Sterling didn't know existed, and one ally who owed her a favor that could reshape the entire game. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The phone call that would save Alana's life came from an unexpected source, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the pediatric cardiologist who had performed Amara's heart surgery 2 years earlier. Dr. Rodriguez wasn't calling about medical care. She was calling about business. "Miss Morrison, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I've been following your situation in the news. I also happen to sit on the board of directors for Children's Medical International, and we've been looking for a construction partner for our new hospital complex in Atlanta." Alana sat on the floor of her empty living room, surrounded by foreclosure notices and bankruptcy paperwork, trying to process what she was hearing. "Dr. Rodriguez, I appreciate the thought, but Morrison Construction is complicated right now, which is exactly why I'm calling. We're not interested in the largest firm or the most politically connected one. We need someone who understands what it means to fight for children's lives. Someone who won't cut corners when a child's safety is at stake. Your reputation before this mess was impeccable, and frankly, we trust your judgment more than we trust the firms that have never faced real adversity." The project Dr. Rodriguez described was massive. A $400 million pediatric medical complex that would serve children across the Southeast. Children's Medical International was a non-profit organization funded by some of the wealthiest philanthropists in the country, and they had specifically requested a minority-owned firm to lead the construction. The board vote is next week. We can fast-track the contract approval if you're interested, and we're prepared to offer a signing bonus that would cover your immediate financial obligations. Alana closed her eyes, afraid to hope. Dr. Rodriguez, I need to be completely honest with you. I'm facing federal investigation, bankruptcy proceedings, and custody battles. Morrison Construction might not survive the year. Ms. Morrison, do you remember what you told me the night before Mara's surgery? You said that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most important victories. You trusted me to repair your daughter's heart when other doctors said the surgery was too dangerous. Now, I'm asking you to trust me when I say that Children's Medical International needs you, and we don't care about Victoria Sterling's political games. The choice Dr. Rodriguez was offering wasn't just about business. It was about identity. Alana could accept that Victoria Sterling had won, declare bankruptcy, and try to rebuild her life on a smaller scale. She could focus on regaining custody of her children and accept that Morrison Construction was finished. She could choose peace over justice and survival over victory. Or she could bet everything on one last fight. The Atlanta project would require Alana to relocate temporarily, leaving behind everything familiar to build something entirely new. It would mean fighting legal battles from a different state while managing the largest construction project of her career. Most dangerously, it would mean directly competing with Sterling Properties, which was also bidding on major medical facility contracts throughout the Southeast. If I take this project, Victoria Sterling will see it as a declaration of war. Alana told Dr. Rodriguez during their second conversation. She'll use every resource she has to destroy both me and your project. Then I guess we better make sure you win, Dr. Rodriguez replied. Because children need advocates who don't back down from bullies, even when those bullies have more money and better lawyers. The decision to accept the Atlanta contract was the first choice Alana had made in months that felt like moving forward instead of just surviving. But it came with immediate consequences that forced her to confront the depth of her own determination. Taking the job meant acknowledging that she couldn't regain custody of Zoe, Marcus, and Amara while working 18-hour days in another state. It meant accepting that her children would live with Jake and Victoria for the next 2 years while she rebuilt Morrison Construction from scratch. It meant choosing her long-term ability to provide for them over her immediate desire to hold them. The night before she was scheduled to sign the Atlanta contract, Alana drove to Jake's new house in Manly, a sprawling mansion that Victoria had purchased specifically to demonstrate her superiority over Alana's modest family home. She hadn't seen her children in 3 weeks, and a court-supervised visitation was scheduled for the following Saturday. Through the living room window, Alana could see Zoe play with expensive toys she didn't recognize, while Marcus sat quietly on Victoria's pristine white sofa, his breathing machine barely visible in the designer room. Amara was running back and forth, her energy contained but not diminished by the luxury surrounding her. They looked healthy, well cared for, and completely out of place in Victoria's sterile perfection. Jake was nowhere to be seen, but Victoria moved through the room with a practiced efficiency of someone managing children rather than loving them. As Alana watched her children from the car, she realized that Jake and Victoria had given them everything except the one thing they needed most: unconditional love from parents who saw them as gifts rather than obligations. Victoria was providing excellent care, but she was also teaching them that love was conditional on convenience, that family was something you could upgrade when better options became available. The choice crystallized with painful clarity. Alana could fight for immediate custody and spend the next 5 years struggling to provide basic stability, while Victoria's lawyers systematically destroyed every opportunity she tried to create. Or she could use the next 2 years to build something so powerful that no one could ever threaten her children's security again. "I'm not abandoning you," Alana whispered to the window. No, her children couldn't hear her, but needing to say the words anyway. "I'm building us a future that no one can take away." The Atlanta contract signing took place in Dr. Rodriguez's office, with lawyers participating via video conference and contracts executed electronically. The $50 million signing bonus was deposited into Morrison Construction's accounts before Alana left the building, immediately stabilizing the company's finances and allowing her to pay off the most pressing legal bills. But the real transformation began when Alana met her new project team. Children's Medical International had assembled a group of architects, engineers, and contractors who had been specifically chosen for their expertise in pediatric facility design. More importantly, they had been chosen for their commitment to the mission rather than their political connections. This isn't just about building a hospital, explained Michael Chun, the project's lead architect. We're creating a space that can serve children with complex medical needs for the next 50 years. Every design decision we make will impact thousands of families who are going through what you went through with your triplets. Working with people who understood her motivation instead of questioning it was revelatory. For the first time in months, Alana was surrounded by colleagues who saw her medical knowledge and personal experience as assets rather than emotional baggage. They listened when she suggested design modifications based on her years of navigating pediatric facilities with 3 medically fragile children. The project moved quickly, with Alana splitting her time between Atlanta and Washington. While fighting legal battles in both jurisdictions, Victoria's attempts to interfere with the Children's Medical International contract were blocked by the organization's board, which included some of the most influential philanthropists in the country. For the first time, Alana had allies with resources that matched Victoria's political connections. 6 months into the Atlanta project, Alana received a call that changed everything once again. Rebecca Martinez, the private investigator, had continued working on Jake's case even after the criminal charges were dismissed. She had discovered something that Victoria's lawyers hadn't been able to hide or manipulate. Miss Morrison, I found something you need to see immediately. Can you fly back to D.C. this weekend? The evidence Rebecca had uncovered wasn't about financial fraud or forged signatures. It was about Jake's fitness as a parent, documented in ways that even Victoria's money couldn't explain away. Hotel records showing Jake leaving the children alone in Victoria's penthouse while he and Victoria traveled together for days at a time. Medical records showing missed appointments and delayed treatments for all 3 children. Most damaging of all, recordings from Victoria's own security system that captured her true feelings about the children she was supposed to be helping raise. These children are exhausting. Victoria's voice was clear on the recording, speaking to someone identified as her personal assistant. The little one with the breathing problems cries constantly, and the physical therapy sessions are disrupting my entire schedule. I cannot wait until we can send them back to their mother. What about Mr. Henderson? The assistant asked. Jake is useful, but he comes with more baggage than I anticipated. Once our IPO is complete and I have everything I need from him, I'll be ready to move on to someone less complicated. The recordings were legal evidence captured by Victoria's own security system and authenticated by digital forensics experts. They proved that the children were being cared for, but not loved, that Victoria saw them as temporary inconveniences, and most importantly, that she was planning to abandon Jake the same way he had abandoned Alana. But beyond the legal implications, the recordings gave Alana something even more valuable: absolute clarity about her purpose. She wasn't fighting for revenge anymore. She was fighting to protect her children from people who saw them as disposable. And she was fighting to ensure that no other family would be destroyed by the kind of systematic cruelty Victoria Sterling practiced. The choice Alana faced was no longer impossible. It was inevitable. She would finish the Atlanta project, establish Morrison Construction as a national leader in pediatric facility construction, and use every resource she gained to expose the truth about Victoria Sterling and Jake Henderson. She would prove that some people could not be bought, broken, or silenced, no matter how much money and influence were arrayed against them. Most importantly, she would show her children that love means fighting for what matters, not when it's convenient, but when it's necessary. The war Victoria Sterling thought she had won was about to become the fight that defined the rest of their lives. And Alana Morrison was no longer the desperate, overwhelmed Mother Victoria had systematically destroyed. She was a woman with a $400 million project, a team of allies who believed in justice, and evidence that could bring down the people who had tried to destroy her family. The impossible choice had become the foundation for something unstoppable. The Children's Medical International Hospital complex opened 18 months ahead of schedule and $40 million under budget. The achievement made national news, positioning Morrison Construction as one of the premier pediatric facility contractors in the country. But more importantly, It gave Alana the platform she needed to execute the final phase of her plan. The gala celebrating the hospital's completion was held at the Grand Ballroom in Atlanta with 500 guests, including medical professionals, philanthropists, and industry leaders from across the country. Alana had specifically requested that the invitation list include executives from Sterling Properties, knowing that Victoria's competitive nature would demand she attend. What Victoria didn't know was that the evening's program would include more than just speeches about medical innovation and community service. Alana stood backstage 30 minutes before her scheduled remarks, wearing the emerald gown that Dr. Rodriguez had helped her select. The woman staring back from the mirror looked nothing like the exhausted Mother Victoria had destroyed 3 years earlier. This woman was poised, powerful, and absolutely certain of her purpose. "They're all seated," Michael Chin reported, checking his phone for updates from the event coordinators. "Sterling and Henderson are at table 12, front and center. They brought press credentials for 3 business journalists." Perfect. Victoria had come expecting to be celebrated as the successful businesswoman she pretended to be. Instead, she was about to witness the complete dismantling of the empire she had built on lies and stolen lives. The program began with testimonials from families whose children would be served by the new medical complex. Parents spoke tearfully about the hope the facility represented, about the difference between adequate medical care and the kind of comprehensive treatment their children deserved. Each story was a reminder of why the work mattered, and why people like Victoria Sterling, who saw children as inconveniences rather than treasures, needed to be stopped. Dr. Rodriguez introduced Alana with words that made Victoria shift uncomfortably in her seat. "Tonight, we celebrate not just a building, but a woman who transformed personal tragedy into purpose." Alana Morrison didn't just construct a hospital. She created a legacy that will serve children for generations, despite facing obstacles that would have destroyed most people. Alana walked to the podium and paused before speaking, making eye contact with Victoria and Jake at table 12. Victoria's expression was confident, almost bored. Jake looked uncomfortable, like he sensed something was wrong, but couldn't identify the threat. "Thank you all for being here tonight." Alana began, her voice steady and clear. 3 years ago, I was a mother fighting to keep my children alive while my business and my marriage collapsed around me. Tonight, I'm the CEO of Morrison Construction, the lead contractor for pediatric medical facilities across the Southeast, and a woman who learned that some battles require patience, strategy, and the courage to tell the truth even when powerful people want you to stay silent. Victoria's posture changed slightly, her confidence wavering as she realized this speech wasn't following the expected script. "I built this hospital for every parent who has been told their child's medical needs are too expensive, too complicated, or too inconvenient. For every family that has been abandoned by people who promise to love them through sickness and health. And for every woman who has been systematically destroyed by someone with more money and fewer scruples." The room had gone completely silent. Several journalists were already recording, sensing that something newsworthy was about to happen. "You have 30 seconds to explain why you deserve even a single dollar from the woman you called worthless." Alana pressed the remote control in her hand, and the screens throughout the ballroom came to life with a presentation titled "The Price of Betrayal," a case study in corporate fraud and family destruction. The first slide was a timeline showing Jake's affair with Victoria, beginning during Alana's pregnancy and continuing to the children's NICU stay. Hotel records, credit card receipts, and text messages documented every lie Jake had told while Alana struggled to keep their children alive. Victoria stood abruptly, but Alana's voice stopped her. "Please sit down, Miss Sterling. We're just getting started." The second section of the presentation detailed the financial fraud. Bank records showed how Jake had systematically drained their savings and forged Alana's signature to fund his new life with Victoria. More damaging were the emails between Victoria and her attorneys, discussing strategies to cover up the fraud and manipulate the investigation. "Miss Morrison, this is slander." Victoria's attorney called out from the audience. "We'll be filing legal action." "With what evidence?" Alana interrupted calmly. "Everything on these screens has been verified by forensic accountants and submitted to the FBI, which brings us to the interesting part. The third section revealed Victoria's own fraudulent business practices. Over the past 2 years, while Alana built Morrison Construction legitimately, Rebecca Martinez's investigation had uncovered evidence that Sterling Properties had been systematically defrauding federal contracting programs by falsifying minority ownership claims and bribing procurement officials. The Department of Justice has been investigating Sterling Properties for 18 months. Alana explained as documents filled the screens. I provided them with evidence of Miss Sterling's fraudulent practices, including her attempts to use forged documents to qualify for minority business contracts, while actually maintaining complete control of her supposedly diverse partnerships. Victoria's face had gone pale. Several Sterling Properties executives seated near her began whispering urgently into their phones. But Alana wasn't finished. The fourth section was the most devastating because it struck at Victoria's carefully crafted public image. The screen showed security footage from Victoria's home, the same recordings that had captured her conversations about the children. But Alana had selected clips that revealed Victoria's character in ways that transcended the custody case. These children are exhausting, played for the entire ballroom, followed by Victoria's dismissive comments about Jake being useful but temporary. Most damaging were recordings of Victoria instructing her staff to minimize expenses related to the triplets' medical care, delaying treatments, and canceling therapy sessions to avoid disrupting her social calendar. The medical professionals in the audience reacted with visible horror. Children's Medical International board members exchanged shocked glances. The journalists were typing furiously, recognizing that this story would dominate headlines for weeks. Miss Sterling built her empire on fraud and maintained it through systematic cruelty. Alana continued. She stole my husband not because she loved him, but because she saw him as a convenient accessory. She took temporary custody of my children, not to care for them, but to punish me for refusing to disappear quietly. And she tried to destroy Morrison Construction because she couldn't tolerate the existence of a woman who refused to accept that wealth equals power. Jake had slumped in his chair, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistakes. He had traded his family for a woman who saw him as disposable, sacrificed his children's well-being for money that was never really his, and aligned himself with someone whose cruelty was now being exposed in front of everyone who mattered in their industry. But here's what Victoria Sterling didn't understand. Alana said, her voice gaining strength. You can't destroy someone who refuses to believe they're broken. You can't defeat someone who transforms pain into purpose. And you can't win a war against someone who is fighting for their children instead of fighting for status. The final section of the presentation revealed Morrison Construction's true success. The $400 million Atlanta project was just the beginning. Alana had secured contracts for 5 additional pediatric medical facilities across the country, establishing a division specifically focused on designing spaces for children with complex medical needs. The company's valuation had reached $1.2 billion, making Alana one of the youngest black female billionaires in construction industry. Morrison Construction now employs over 300 people and has secured contracts worth over $2 billion over the next 5 years. Every project bears the names of my children. The Zoe Morrison Center for Pediatric Rehabilitation, the Marcus Morrison Wing for Respiratory Care, and the Amara Morrison Foundation for Cardiac Treatment. Alana paused, looking directly at Victoria. I turned the pain you gave me into a legacy you could never touch. I transformed betrayal you orchestrated into purpose you could never understand. And I did it while raising 3 extraordinary children who will grow up knowing that their mother never stopped fighting for them. The ballroom erupted in applause. But Alana wasn't done. She had one final revelation that would ensure Victoria Sterling never threatened another family. The FBI will be executing search warrants at Sterling Properties offices tomorrow morning. The evidence of Miss Sterling's fraud has been submitted to federal prosecutors, and criminal charges are expected within the month. Additionally, every business partner who has been defrauded by Sterling Properties has been provided with documentation supporting civil lawsuits. Victoria stood again, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. You have no right. I have every right. Alana's voice was still. You try to destroy my family, my business, and my reputation. You use wealth and connections to manipulate the legal system and terrorize a woman who was trying to care for sick children. You taught my ex-husband that betrayal was acceptable if the price was right. And you thought you would face no consequences because you had never met someone who could fight back. Security guards were already moving toward Victoria's table as FBI agents entered the ballroom. The evening celebration had become an arrest, and the woman who had spent years wielding power without accountability was about to face justice. But Alana's attention had shifted to someone else. Jake Henderson sat frozen at table 12, watching his world collapse with the same stunned expression he had worn the night Alana received the I-95 contract. The man who had abandoned his children for wealth and status was about to lose both, and the wife he had called worthless was now the woman who controlled his future. "Mr. Henderson," Alana said softly, "you asked me once why I couldn't be realistic about what our life had become. Now I have a question for you. Was it worth it? Was Victoria's money worth losing your children? Was the promise of partnership worth betraying the woman who loved you? Was status worth the price of your integrity?" Jake opened his mouth, but no words came out. There was nothing he could say that would change the reality of his situation. He had gambled everything on Victoria Sterling's promises and lost completely. As FBI agents escorted Victoria from the ballroom, Alana made one final announcement that demonstrated the full measure of her transformation. "I'm donating $100 million to establish the Morrison Family Foundation, dedicated to providing legal assistance and financial support to families fighting custody battles against wealthy opponents who use the legal system as a weapon. No parent should face what I faced, the choice between caring for your children and funding endless legal battles against someone with unlimited resources." The foundation wasn't just charity. It was a declaration that Alana Morrison had turned her personal devastation into systemic change, that her suffering would become someone else's salvation. The evening ended with Alana surrounded by supporters, journalists, and business leaders who wanted to partner with Morrison Construction. But the most meaningful moment came when Dr. Rodriguez approached with tears in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered. "You turned tragedy into triumph." Alana smiled, but her expression was complicated. "I proved that justice is possible, but the real victory won't come tonight. It will come when my children are old enough to understand that their mother never stopped fighting for them, even when fighting meant letting them go temporarily." Outside the ballroom, Victoria Sterling was being photographed in handcuffs while Jake Henderson sat alone in his car, finally understanding the full price of his betrayal. The man who had thought he was trading up had actually traded everything that mattered for nothing that lasted. And the woman he had abandoned, the one he called worthless and dismissed as a burden, was now the one person who could save him, if only he had chosen differently 3 years ago. The 18 months following that gala were a masterclass how thoroughly justice could dismantle injustice when given proper time and evidence. Victoria Sterling's empire collapsed with a kind of spectacular publicity that made business school case studies. The FBI investigation uncovered fraud spanning 12 years, involving over $300 million in falsified contracts. Sterling Properties filed for bankruptcy within 6 months. Its assets seized to pay restitution to the government agencies and business partners Victoria had defrauded. The criminal trial was brief but devastating. Victoria's attorneys, the same ones who had systematically destroyed Alana's credibility 3 years earlier, couldn't overcome the mountain of evidence Rebecca Martinez had compiled. Bank records, email correspondence, recorded conversations, and testimony from former employees painted a portrait of a woman who had built her entire business model on deception and manipulation. The defendant demonstrated a pattern of fraudulent behavior that extended far beyond business dealings. The federal prosecutor argued during closing statements. She manipulated government contracting processes, defrauded her business partners, and used the legal system as a weapon against anyone who threatened to expose her crimes. Victoria Sterling believed that wealth placed her above accountability. Today, we prove that belief was wrong. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Victoria Sterling was convicted on 23 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in federal prison and ordered her to pay $247 million in restitution. But the legal consequences were only part of Victoria's fall. Her social standing, the carefully cultivated image of the successful businesswoman and philanthropist, was destroyed even more thoroughly than her finances. The same society publications that had featured her penthouse and charity galas now ran exposes about her fraudulent practices and the families she had destroyed in her pursuit of wealth. The recordings of Victoria's comments about the triplets were particularly damaging to her public image. Parenting organizations condemned her treatment of medically fragile children. Medical professionals who had once attended her fundraisers publicly distanced themselves from someone who had delayed children's medical treatments to avoid schedule inconveniences. Jake Henderson's fate was somehow both better and worse than Victoria's. He avoided criminal charges by cooperating with federal investigators and testifying against Victoria during her trial. The immunity deal saved him from prison, but it couldn't save him from the consequences of his choices. Sterling Properties' collapse meant Jake lost his partnership, his salary, and his reputation in the industry. The business community that had celebrated his rapid rise now viewed him as the opportunist who had abandoned his children for a woman who turned out to be a criminal. No reputable firm would hire someone whose judgment had been so spectacularly poor. But the financial devastation was secondary to the personal losses Jake faced. The custody arrangement that had temporarily given him and Victoria guardianship of the triplets was immediately reversed when Victoria's arrest made national news. Family court judges don't look favorably on parents who involve children in criminal enterprises, even tangentially. The hearing where custody reverted fully to Alana was the first time Jake had seen his children in 3 months. Zoe, now 6 years old, looked at him with the kind of polite distance a child might show a stranger. Marcus, still managing his respiratory issues, but significantly stronger than he'd been 3 years ago, held Alana's hand and refused to look at his father. Amara, the most outgoing of the three, asked a question that broke Jake's carefully maintained composure. "Are you coming to live with us now, Daddy?" Jake looked at Alana, standing in the courtroom with the quiet confidence of a woman who had survived everything he had thrown at her and emerged stronger. She was wearing a tailored suit that spoke of success without ostentation. Her hair pulled back in a style that was professional but warm. She looked nothing like the exhausted mother he had abandoned and everything like the woman he had underestimated. "No, sweetheart." Jake's voice cracked. "Daddy made some bad choices, and now I have to live somewhere else. But you're still our daddy." Amara's innocence was devastating because it revealed what Jake had thrown away. Children who wanted to love him despite everything. If only he had been willing to be present. "I'll always be your father," Jake said, though everyone in the courtroom knew the biological connection was all he had left. "But your mommy is going to take care of you, and she's going to do a much better job than I ever could." The admission cost Jake everything he had left: his pride, his justifications, his ability to pretend he had made reasonable choices. In front of the judge, the attorneys, and most importantly, his children, Jake Henderson finally acknowledged the truth he had been avoiding for 3 years. He had abandoned his family for money and status, and he had lost both along with everything that actually mattered. The judge's custody order was unequivocal. Full physical and legal custody to Alana Morrison, with Jake granted supervised visitation twice per month if Alana agreed. The reversal was complete. Jake had gone from the parent with resources and stability to the parent who needed supervision to spend time with his own children. But Alana's victory in family court was only part of her triumph. Morrison Construction had become exactly what she had envisioned during those desperate nights working at her kitchen table while the triplets slept. The company now employed over 500 people across 6 regional offices, with a project portfolio focused exclusively on facilities serving vulnerable populations, children's hospitals, rehabilitation centers, special needs schools. The Zoe Morrison Center for Pediatric Rehabilitation in Atlanta had become a national model for treating children with developmental delays, offering services that combine physical therapy, occupational therapy, and educational support. The center served over 3,000 children annually, providing treatment regardless of families' ability to pay. The Marcus Morrison Wing for Respiratory Care at Children's Medical International had developed innovative protocols for treating premature infants and children with chronic respiratory conditions. Medical journals published research based on facilities design, and pediatric pulmonologists travel from across the country to study their treatment approaches. The Amara Morrison Foundation for Cardiac Treatment had funded life-saving surgeries for over 200 children whose families couldn't afford the specialized care their heart conditions required. Dr. Rodriguez served as the foundation's medical director, ensuring that every dollar was spent on treatments that would give children the futures they deserved. But beyond the professional success, Alana had achieved something even more remarkable. She had rebuilt her children's lives with a kind of stability and love that made their early years of medical crisis feel like distant history. Marcus' respiratory issues had improved dramatically with age and proper treatment. At 6 years old, he still used breathing treatments before bed, but he could run, play, and keep up with his siblings without the constant fear of respiratory distress. He had developed a passionate interest in building things, spending hours with construction toys, and asking detailed questions about his mother's work. "When I grow up, I'm going to build hospitals too," Marcus announced one evening at dinner, his seriousness making Alana's heart swell. "But mine will have special rooms where kids can play while they get their breathing treatments, so it's not boring." Zoe had blossomed with intensive physical therapy and educational support. The developmental delays that had worried doctors when she was a toddler had largely resolved, though she still worked with specialists to build strength and coordination. She was artistic and empathetic, often drawing pictures of the family she wanted. Mommy, me, Marcus, and Amara, all together forever. Amara, who had recovered completely from her heart surgery, was exactly as energetic and fearless as Alana had predicted she would be. She was a child who made friends instantly, who stood up for her siblings when other children asked about their medical equipment, who announced regularly that she was going to be a doctor like Dr. Rodriguez. "So I can fix people's hearts." The family Alana had fought so desperately to protect had not just survived, they had thrived. The children knew their story, understood that their father had made choices that hurt them, but they also knew that their mother had never stopped fighting for them, even when fighting meant temporary separation. "Mommy, why did Daddy leave us?" Zoe asked one night during their bedtime routine the question Alana had been expecting for years. Alana pulled all 3 children onto the bed, holding them close as she answered with age-appropriate honesty. "Daddy got confused about what was important. He thought money and a fancy job mattered more than family. But he was wrong, and by the time he realized it, too much had changed." "Do you hate him?" Marcus asked, his logical mind seeking clarity. "No, baby, I don't hate him. I'm sad about the choices he made, and I'm angry about the times he hurt you. But mostly I'm grateful because his mistakes taught me how strong we are together. We're a team," Amar declared, borrowing the phrase Alana used constantly. "And teams don't give up on each other." "That's right. We're a team and nothing is ever going to change that." The conversation was one of thousands that marked Alana's transformation from the desperate mother Jake had abandoned to the confident parent who could discuss painful truths while maintaining her children's sense of security. 2 years after the gala, Alana received an invitation that brought everything full circle. The Department of Transportation wanted to honor her at their annual award ceremony recognizing Morrison Construction's completion of the I-95 expansion project. The contract that had started everything but had been suspended during the federal investigation. The project had resumed after Victoria's arrest with Morrison Construction, delivering the completed highway expansion 6 months ahead of schedule and $65 million under budget. The success had cemented Alana's reputation as one of the premier infrastructure contractors in the country. "Miss Morrison, we owe you an apology," Director Patricia Williams said during their pre-ceremony meeting. "The department suspended your contract based on allegations that turned out to be completely false. We should have investigated more thoroughly before taking action that threatened your business." Alana accepted the apology with grace that surprised even herself. 3 years earlier, she would have been angry, bitter about the injustice of having her contract suspended while Victoria's lies were accepted as truth. Now, she understood that Director Williams had been manipulated by someone who had spent years perfecting the art of deception. "I appreciate your honesty," Alana replied. "What matters now is that we completed the project and built something that will serve communities for decades." The award ceremony was attended by federal officials, industry leaders, and journalists documenting the rise of minority-owned firms in government contracting. But the most meaningful attendee was sitting in the front row with Alana's parents, a man in his early 40s who had flown in from Seattle specifically for the event. David Ayanquo was a billionaire philanthropist who had made his fortune in technology before pivoting to social impact investing. He had read about Alana's story in business publications and been intrigued by a woman who had transformed personal tragedy into systematic change. He had reached out 6 months earlier to discuss potential investments in Morrison Construction, and their professional relationship had gradually evolved into something deeper. David was everything Jake had pretended to be, genuinely supportive of Alana's ambitions, comfortable with the demands of raising children with medical histories, and interested in building something meaningful rather than just accumulating wealth. He had met the Triplets during a visit to Atlanta, and within 10 minutes Marcus was showing him construction plans, while Zoe drew pictures of the four of them together, and Amara declared that Mr. David is nice, and he doesn't make mommy sad. Their relationship was careful and intentional, built on friendship and shared values rather than the desperate need for partnership that had defined Alana's marriage to Jake. David had his own children from a previous marriage, and he understood the complexity of blended families and the importance of moving slowly when children's emotions were involved. "I'm not looking to replace their father," David had told Alana during one of their early conversations. "I'm looking to be someone who shows up, who cares about what happens to them, and who supports you in building the life you want for your family." The contrast with Jake couldn't have been more obvious. Jake had promised support, but demanded that Alana sacrifice her ambitions for his convenience. David offered genuine partnership, while celebrating everything Alana had built on her own. During the award ceremony, Alana stood at the podium accepting recognition for the I-95 project and took the opportunity to address the broader implications of her journey. "This award represents more than just a successful construction project," Alana said. "It represents what becomes possible when we refuse to accept that adversity defines our limits. 3 years ago, I was a single mother facing bankruptcy, federal investigation, and the loss of my children. People told me to accept my circumstances, to be realistic about my limitations, to understand that some battles can't be won." She paused, looking at her children sitting with her parents, David beside them. "But I learned something important during those dark months. Some people will try to destroy you because your existence challenges their narrative about who deserves success and who deserves struggle. Some people will use every resource they have to ensure you fail because your victory reveals their cruelty. The choice we face in those moments isn't between fighting and surrendering. It's between accepting their definition of who we are or insisting on our own worth despite everything they do to diminish it." The audience was silent, recognizing that this speech transcended infrastructure projects and business success. This was about the fundamental question of whether justice was possible when power was distributed so unequally. "I built Morrison Construction as proof that systematic cruelty doesn't have to win. That women, particularly black women, can create empires even when the entire system is designed to prevent our success. That children with medical challenges aren't burdens, but treasures worth fighting for. And that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of our story. It can be the beginning of something extraordinary." The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes, but Alana's attention was on her children. Zoe was clapping enthusiastically. Marcus was grinning with pride, and Amara was standing on her chair shouting, "That's my mommy," with a kind of unself-conscious joy that made everything worthwhile. After the ceremony, as people lined up to congratulate her and discuss potential partnerships, Alana noticed a familiar figure standing at the back of the room. Jake Henderson looked smaller somehow, diminished by circumstances and choices. He was wearing an off-Derrick suit that suggested financial struggles, and his expression was haunted by regret. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and for a moment Alana saw the man she had married beneath the wreckage of the man he had become. Part of her, a very small part, felt sorry for him. He had gambled everything on Victoria Sterling's promises, and lost so completely that he would spend the rest of his life calculating the cost of his betrayal. But sympathy didn't mean forgiveness, and understanding his regret didn't obligate her to ease his conscience. Jake approached slowly like a man walking to his own sentencing. "Alana," he stopped, unable to find words adequate to the magnitude of his mistakes. "I am sorry." "I know that's not enough, but I need you to know that I understand what I destroyed." Alana looked at this man who had once promised to love her through sickness and health, who had abandoned their children when they needed him most, who had chosen wealth over family and lost both. She had spent years imagining this moment, rehearsing the things she might say when Jake finally admitted the truth. But now, standing in front of him with her children happy and healthy just a few feet away, Alana realized that Jake's apology didn't matter anymore. His regret couldn't change the past, couldn't restore the years he had missed, couldn't undo the trauma his choices had inflicted on their children. "I appreciate you saying that," Alana replied calmly, "but my life isn't about your redemption anymore. I've built something beautiful from the wreckage you left behind, and I've taught our children that their worth isn't determined by the people who abandoned them. Can I see them just for a few minutes?" Jake's voice broke slightly. "I know I don't deserve. You see them twice a month during supervised visitation, as the court ordered. That's the relationship you chose when you decided Victoria's money mattered more than their love." Alana's tone wasn't cruel, just factual. Those children deserve parents who show up consistently, who prioritize their needs, who demonstrate that love is more than occasional guilt-driven gestures. "I want to be better," Jake whispered. "I want to be the father they deserve." Then start showing up to your visitations without being reminded. Start paying child support without court enforcement. Start attending their medical appointments and school events. Start proving through consistent action that you've changed instead of making promises you won't keep. Alana paused, softening slightly, because she understood that part of healing meant releasing the anger she had carried for so long. "Jake, I don't hate you. I actually hope you find a way to build a meaningful relationship with our children as they grow up. But that relationship will be built on who you become from this point forward, not on who you were when we got married. And us." Jake asked even though he clearly knew the answer. "There is no us. There's you, there's me. And there are 3 children who deserve better from both of their parents. The difference is that I've spent the past 3 years proving I can provide that. Now it's your turn to demonstrate what kind of father you're capable of being." David appeared at Alana's elbow, his presence a subtle reminder of the life she had built beyond Jake's betrayal. "Everything okay here?" he asked quietly, his tone neutral but protective. "Everything's fine," Alana replied, taking David's hand. Jake was just leaving. As Jake walked away, Alana felt the last weight of her failed marriage lift from her shoulders. She had spent years carrying the pain of his abandonment, the humiliation of his betrayal, the fear that his choices somehow reflected her inadequacy. Now, finally, she understood that Jake's decisions revealed nothing about her worth and everything about his character. The evening concluded with Alana, David, her parents, and the triplets celebrating at the children's favorite restaurant, a casual place with terrible acoustics and mediocre food, but waiters who knew Marcus' breathing issues and didn't mind when Amar's enthusiasm knocked over water glasses. "Mommy, did you really build that whole highway?" Marcus asked between bites of chicken fingers. "I didn't build it myself," Alana explained. "I had a team of engineers and construction workers who did the actual building, but I designed the project, managed the teams, and made sure everything was built safely and correctly." "That's so cool," Zoe breathed. "You're like a superhero, but for roads." David laughed at that, and Alana felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in years. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Comfortable, supportive, built on genuine affection rather than obligation or convenience. Later that night, after the children were asleep in their hotel room and Alana's parents had retired for the evening, she and David sat on the balcony overlooking the city and talked about the future. "I want you to know that I'm not looking to rush into anything," David said carefully. "But I also want you to know that I'm serious about this, about us, about the kids, about building something lasting." Alana smiled, understanding that David was offering exactly what she needed: partnership without pressure, support without strings, love that was patient enough to develop at a pace that protected her children's hearts. "I'm serious, too," she replied. "But I need you to understand that my children will always come first. Their needs, their security, their emotional well-being, everything else is secondary. I wouldn't have it any other way." David said, "One of the things I admire most about you is that you've never compromised on what matters. You've built an empire without sacrificing your children's welfare, and that's exactly the kind of person I want in my life." The conversation continued late into the night. Two people who had both experienced betrayal, finding hope in the possibility of something better. Alana didn't know yet if David would become a permanent part of their family, but she knew that for the first time in years, she was open to the possibility of love that didn't require her to diminish herself. 3 months after the award ceremony, Morrison Construction announced its largest contract yet, a $1.80 $8 billion project to build a network of specialized medical facilities across 10 states, all designed to serve children with complex medical needs. The project would create thousands of jobs and establish Morrison Construction as the undisputed leader in pediatric facility design. The announcement made headlines in business publications and news outlets, with journalists noting that Alana Morrison had built a billion-dollar empire in less than 5 years while raising 3 children as a single mother. The story had every element that made for compelling narrative betrayal, perseverance, vindication, and triumph over systematic opposition. But for Alana, the real victory wasn't the headlines or the contract value. It was the morning she woke up to find all 3 children piled into her bed. Marcus reading a book about construction equipment, Zoe drawing pictures of their family, and Amara planning the elaborate breakfast she wanted to make. "Mommy, when you build all those hospitals, can we come visit them?" Amara asked. "Absolutely," Alana replied, pulling all 3 children close. "We'll visit every single one, and I'll show you exactly how we designed them to help children just like you. Children who are strong and brave and deserve every opportunity to thrive." "We're thriving now," Marcus observed with his characteristic seriousness. "Right? We're definitely thriving, baby." And as Alana held her children, she reflected on the impossible journey that had brought them to this moment. She had gone from a woman whose husband called her worthless to a billionaire CEO, from someone who couldn't afford to keep her home, to someone who designed facilities that would serve communities for generations, from a mother who had temporarily lost custody of her children, to a parent who had built an empire with their names on it. But the transformation wasn't just about business success or financial security. It was about proving that love, real, unconditional, sacrificial love, was more powerful than wealth, more enduring than status, and more valuable than any empire built on cruelty and deception. Jake Henderson had chosen money over family and lost both. Victoria Sterling had wielded power without accountability and discovered that justice was patient but inevitable. And Alana Morrison had transformed betrayal into purpose, proving that some women don't break when everything falls apart. They rebuild themselves into something unbreakable. The story could have ended there with Alana triumphant and her enemies defeated, but life is rarely that simple. And the most important chapters often come after we think the story is over. So, where are you watching from today? How's the weather treating you, wherever you are in the world? I hope you're somewhere comfortable, maybe with a cup of coffee or tea, because I need you to hear something important before we finish the story. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you're not enough, if someone has made you feel worthless, if you've been betrayed by someone who promised to love you, I need you to understand that their assessment of your value says everything about them and nothing about you. Alana Morrison's story is extraordinary, but the truth at its heart is universal. You are not defined by the people who abandon you. Your worth isn't determined by those who underestimate you, and your future isn't limited by those who try to destroy you. If this story resonated with you, do me a favor. Hit that like button to remind yourself that you deserve better than betrayal. Subscribe to this channel because everyone needs to hear stories about people who refuse to stay broken. And share this video with someone who needs to know that triumph is possible even after devastating loss. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what part of Alana's story hit home for you. Are you rebuilding after betrayal? Are you fighting for your children against impossible odds? Are you proving wrong everyone who underestimated you? I want to hear your story. 5 years later, Alana Morrison married David Anquo in a small ceremony attended by family, close friends, and 3 flower girls who took their responsibilities very seriously. Zoe, Marcus, and Amara walked their mother down the aisle, a symbol that this family had been built together through love and perseverance. Morrison Construction expanded internationally, building pediatric facilities across North America and beginning projects in South America and Africa. The company's mission remained unchanged: create spaces where vulnerable children could receive world-class care regardless of their family's financial circumstances. The triplets thrive in ways that doctors had once thought impossible. Marcus became passionate about engineering, spending weekends at construction sites with his mother learning how buildings came together. Zoe developed into a talented artist whose drawings of families appeared in children's hospitals across the country. Amara, true to her word, began volunteering at the local children's hospital. Determined to become a pediatric cardiologist like Dr. Rodriguez, Jake Henderson eventually rebuilt a relationship with his children. Though it took years of consistent effort and genuine change, he worked as a project manager for a small construction firm, living modestly and attending every visitation, every school event, every medical appointment without excuses or complaints. The relationship he developed with Zoe, Marcus, and Amar was nothing like what it could have been if he had made better choices. But it was honest and slowly healing. Victoria Sterling served 12 years of her 15-year sentence before being released on parole. She emerged from prison to find that the world she had once dominated had moved on without her. The empire she had built through fraud and manipulation had been dismantled, distributed to the people she had harmed, and transformed into something better than it had ever been under her control. But the most important outcome of Alana's story wasn't measured in contracts signed or enemies defeated. It was measured in the 3 children who grew up knowing that their mother had never stopped fighting for them, that love was more powerful than money, and that some people refuse to accept that adversity defines their destiny. The Morrison Family Foundation, funded by Alana's success, went on to help thousands of families facing the same systematic destruction she had survived. Legal fees were covered, housing was secured, and children remained with parents who loved them instead of being removed by people who had more money but less heart. And sometimes late at night when the children were asleep and the work was done, Alana would stand on the balcony of the home she had built and reflect on the impossible journey that had brought her to this moment of peace. She had been betrayed by the person who promised to love her, destroyed by someone who wielded wealth as a weapon, separated from her children when they needed her most, told by powerful people that she should accept her circumstances and stop fighting battles she couldn't win. But Alana Morrison had never been very good at accepting impossible odds. Instead, she had transformed pain into purpose, betrayal into triumph, and devastating loss into a legacy that would serve vulnerable families for generations. Some stories end with victory. This one ends with something better. Proof that love, determination, and refusing to believe in your own worthlessness can overcome any obstacle, defeat any enemy, and build something beautiful from even the most devastating betrayal. The woman Jay Henderson called worthless became worth over $1.2 billion. The children he abandoned became extraordinary despite his absence. And the empire built on their names became proof that some legacies are built not on what we take from others, but on what we give to those who need us most. Thank you for watching the story. If it moved you, challenged you, or reminded you of your own strength, please like, subscribe, and share, because everyone needs to know that the end of one chapter can be the beginning of something extraordinary. Drop a comment and let me know what would you have done in Alana's situation, and what impossible odds are you overcoming right now. Your story matters. Your strength matters. And you are worth so much more than the people who try to diminish you ever understood. Until next time, keep fighting for what matters. Keep believing in your own worth, and keep building something beautiful from whatever circumstances life has handed you. This is your reminder. You are not broken. You are becoming.